Thank you for joining us for this sermon podcast from United Christian Church of Austin, where no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you're invited and welcome. This Sunday, July 9th, is one of our instant sermon Sundays at United Christian Church, when Reverend John and Reverend Nikki respond to questions from the congregation. Questions about theology, church history, ethics, or current events. Whatever's on our minds, we bring them to God together. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to learn more about our open and affirming ministry at United Christian Church, simply head over to our website, www.uccaustin.org. Thank you.
There are a lot of questions in here. We are not going to respond to all of these questions today. We'd like you to go and have lunch or something. So we're going to pray over all the questions, and our promise to you is two things. We'll answer whatever comes out of the box. We will respond to those questions. And the other is that we will post all of these questions up on our Facebook page and on our website, so you can see what other folks in the congregation are thinking and wondering about. I think that's almost as useful as hearing us respond to any of them, to know what folks are thinking. So, Holy God, we give you thanks for the gift of faith, which is different from certainty. Faith that draws us into a relationship with you, and a relationship of trust. So that when questions arise, not if, we lean into that faith onto those everlasting arms and know that you are with us as we try our very best to respond as you would, in love, in justice, and in peace. All your holy names, Lord.
This you can only answer this one.
Okay.
Did you learn anything at gathering or synod that you want to share?
Oh, wonderful. Yay. So I was not exactly resting last Sunday. I spent 8 days in Baltimore, Maryland for the Open and Affirming Coalition gathering of the United Church of Christ and the General Synod of the United Church of Christ. The General Synod is a biannual meeting every other year. About 3,000 folks from across the church come together. Delegates representing churches from Hawaii to Alaska to Maine to Florida to Texas. This year was in Baltimore. I'm kind of a synod junkie. This was my 8th General Synod in a row. I've gone 3 times as delegate. It's, to me, fascinating and beautiful to see the breadth of diversity within the church. We only get to see our little pocket. The Open and Affirming Coalition used to be called the United Church of Christ Coalition for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Concerns. So they shortened it. That's something that I've been going to also that's every year. I've missed 2 in the past 17 years. That's an important part of my spiritual life. And I used to be, in fact, the national moderator of that organization for a while. The thing that happened to me at General Synod and gathering that was the most meaningful, I've got to say, is that Maddie Hackenberg was there. And this was Maddie's 3rd gathering. And when she went last time, she said, has anybody ever done a workshop for you on the concept of a lot of people who identify as asexual? That's a thing. How many of you have learned more things in the past many years than that, right? How many things, one thing after another, right? What we're really learning about is the breadth and diversity of people's real, actual lives. We're not learning categories. We're learning words to help us learn about other people's experiences they share with us. And Betty said, have you ever had anybody come and present on that? And they said, no. Would you like to do that? And so she came this time and she did. And she gave an incredible presentation. It was very well organized, it was very well researched, and it was very personally felt. And I think it really enlightened a lot of folks. You might think that as the LGBT coalition, as the Open and Affirming Coalition, we had a handle on all of them. But there were a lot of folks who did not know that was a thing. and to hear her speak was so moving. And she was ably assisted by her media consultant who was with her doing slides. So that was honestly my proudest moment at the General Synod and at the gathering. So thank you for asking that.
She got started in on the
Yeah. Right, and now she's going to be on the leadership team. Exactly, no good deed goes unpunished. All right, and for Nikki. Why do we pray, lead us not into temptation, in the Lord's Prayer? God is good and wouldn't lead us into temptation, right?
Speaking from personal experience, I'm tempted all the time. I think it's a really interesting question. A lot of that has to do with how we view God, because you have to back up and think about how you view God is going to affect how you then see God working in the world, how you see God working in your own life, how you see God working in others, impacting the world. A couple years ago on our youth retreat, we read this great book called The Four Gods, and it talked about you kind of these tests, and you figured out whether or not you figured out God was very close in the world or very far. Was God very intimate? Or was God very distant? And then there was another question that was asked was, do you think God is being very judgmental in the world or being very non-judgmental in the world? And depending on how you answered those questions, put on a quadrant, you ended up in these 4 different areas of how you view God. So for people who view God as very intimate and in this world, almost like moving things around, and as God is very judgment, might have this view of God of maybe moving oneself towards temptation, right? Those who view God as very distant and maybe not very involved in the world and not judgmental, might not, that phrase, lead us into temptation, might have a very different meaning. Okay, so that people might not think of God as being someone who actually leads one into temptation.
I remember, in fact, there's a version of the Lord's Prayer where that phrase is changed to save us from the time of trial.
Right.
And you can see how those reflect very different understandings of God in that way.
So for individual, I know me personally in my life, there are things that are definitely things that I trip over, that I stumble. In fact, sometimes I wake up in the morning, it's like, oh, not this again, right? Not this challenge again, right? And I do think that that's part of God working in my life so that I can be a whole person, so that I can be as complete of a person as I can be. But as we all know, God is not just about me individually, it's about us collectively. And if we think about our world collectively, there are things that we stumble on all the time, right? We open up the Bible and we can read about wars that happened 100,000 years ago, right? Long time ago. And so this idea of our world as a broken world, there are things that we're going to stumble on, things that we're going to fall over, I think is very important, something that we got to deal with.
And for me, it's lead me not into temptation. I don't think I need help in that area. There's a wonderful line, lead me not into temptation, for I know the way. At that point, that's so again, it's how do you think that God is constantly testing you and poking you, or do you think that it's life that's doing that and we are responding the best? In fact, we're asking God to lead us through temptation into a better way of living.
Where did the God idea come from?
Oh my goodness. First, the earth cooled. Where did the God idea come from? So interestingly, my route to ministry came through, in fact, doing religious studies in college. And people think, oh, yeah, you're a minister. Of course, you did religious studies. I go, no. I studied sociology and anthropology of religion. My senior thesis was Japanese government manipulation of Shinto and imperial tradition from 1868 to 1889. My parents were praying fervently during that period. So the idea that there is something, I think what you get at root is the idea that there is something more to life. That there is simply something more, that this is all well and good and real, but there is something that connects us, something that challenges us, something that comforts us, something that encourages us that is more. And I think we get that from looking around at nature. Has anyone ever, this is where we get the word awe, right? It's because when you go to the Grand Canyon and you watch the sunset, you go, aw. This sense of reverence before a world that is larger than we are, that's more than the sum of its parts. But it also, I really think, comes from relationship. We talk about when 2 or 3 are gathered together, that Christ will be in the midst of us. That the calculus of our relationships mean that when you and I are in relationships, something else happens that's more than just you plus me. That all of our relationships are kind of procreative that way. That we're creating, that love is this thing that is more. All of this together. And as we live into that and try and figure out how that works in our lives, we begin to shape that in our understanding. And it's easier for us to relate to a person than it is to a thing. And so we begin to imagine God as a person. Now, hear me, God I believe in is personal, but in no way, shape, or form is God a person, or even 3 people. But we relate to God personally. I think of the phrase, we just shared it at the funeral I did yesterday, that now we see as though in a mirror dimly. But then we will know, then we will see clearly, then we will know fully, even as we are fully known. It's that idea that we're not alone. And we embody that for one another. I think that's one reason that our Christian faith is not a Lone Ranger faith. That we come to know God best, this God thing that's been shaped over millennia, that we know God best in community with one another. Because that's where we experience the more, for good and for ill. Hard things and good things. We experience all of that more together. Tiny answer.
Yeah, and I would add to that, you get a lot of questions of how do you know God is real? How can you prove that, right? And for me, it is the fact that over history and time, all civilizations have come to some point of understanding there's something greater than them going on. Now, they might describe that and live that out differently than we live today. But still, throughout history, groups of people have always come together and attributed this something more out there, and then created that thing in their mind and related to that thing or things in a way that was trying to show reverence, that was trying to understand the world around them, that was even crying out, why is this happening to us? And so for me, the fact that keeps happening over and over and over again is almost my proof that there is something out there. And again, this relational idea to it.
All right.
I don't remember. Oh, wait, you answered first. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
What do you believe the purpose of the plagues of Egypt were? What do you believe was the purpose of the plagues visited upon Egypt?
So in the Lord's Prayer, we could have, please don't lead me into temptation. No, it's really interesting. I view a lot of our stories in the Old Testament just that as stories. Not to say that there aren't truths to them, but how many of you in your families have had this story that's been passed down from generations to generations, or even just within a couple of years, right? And it's amazing to me how the story it kind of changes sometimes. Like Ian and I have this happen all the time, right? If we were to explain our day yesterday, I'm sure we would explain totally different aspects of it that were important and that had meaning for us. And to me, when I think about these stories and the hardships the plagues that occurred in Egypt, to me they represent those things in our life that life throws at us. In a society where it is mainly rural, granted they were living in cities or trying to build these nice temples, but still they're basically living out in what I picture as country. The things that are going to affect their lives, the things that are going to throw them off kilter are going to be things like weather and things like animals that destroy harvests, diseases, right? Because they weren't living in areas that where they knew about how to clean oneself and stuff. And so to me, I look at those stories very representative of the hardships that we face today, the temptations that we have, the battles that we have.
The consequences that we suffer.
Right, exactly. So I think that's why those stories are meaningful and why they continue to be shared orally throughout history, because as those stories were told and you hear them, new people that were hearing could relate to those challenges that were happening to them, the plagues that were happening in their lives.
Well, and to make this, to bring this right up to the present day, this is not an Old Testament phenomenon. After 9/11, I think it was it Jerry Falwell? No, who was it? Pat Robertson, probably, went on and said that the whole thing was the fault of the gays. Right? That God was visiting judgment on the United States for our acceptance of homosexuality. And for this reason, God struck a plane and brought it down and made it hit a building and killed thousands and thousands of people to teach us this lesson. It really goes back right to your first point about what kind of God is it that you believe in. And I think about that, and I think that it's very human to want to read God into the misery of our life. We have this idea that we can never be good enough. Most of us were raised perhaps with a God for whom we can never be good enough, who is constantly punishing us and chastising us in order to teach us lessons. It's not a very pretty picture. We have to do a lot of backflips to figure out how that's loving in a lot of ways. And so we imagine God doing this to other people as well. Possibly because the alternative that there's nothing in it, that it's just natural, is too terrifying. But it also, we don't have to read those stories as we've inherited them that way. There is a wonderful rabbinic story, and the Jewish tradition does this way better than the Christian tradition. They read those stories over and over again and imagine. They use their theological imaginations to interpret and reinterpret them. There's a wonderful rabbinic story about this is the culmination of the plagues, right? The Hebrew people are led through the Red Sea. Pharaoh and his chariots charge after them, and just as the Hebrews reach safety, the waters collapse back in and drown all of Pharaoh's army. And Miriam, in fact, dances on the other side. And the rabbinic story says that when this happened, the angels in heaven began to rejoice and shout hallelujah. And God said, "Hush your mouth. Can you not see that my children are dying?" So to take that story, which is a very human story, and to dare to do something different and maybe even divine with it. To me, that story is the kernel that can grow a lot of different ways, depending on the God that we believe in and who feeds that. So, all right, one more. I'm gonna get what's your favorite color?
Oh, that's my husband's. I'm not doing that one. Sorry, Ian.
It's for me.
All right. You asked for it.
Is it a two-parter?
The saying goes, think globally, act locally. It assumes a natural synergy between local needs and the broader needs of the world. But we, this community of Christ, being human, only has so much to go around. What is the right balance for this congregation for meeting needs within the community and wider social activism where we're also called to undertake?
60-40. Are you ready for your question? That's a fantastic. Thank you. That is a fantastic question. That is, how do we strike this balance between caring for those who are close to us and caring for those who are further away? Between justice for those we know and love dearly and justice for folks who might be strangers to us. And I think that's a particular challenge for this congregation. One of our gifts, I think, after 3.5 years of being here, one of the gifts that I see in our congregation is this sense that we are family together. That's not an experience that everybody has in church. For me, that feels like that's the main image and metaphor for this church. We are family together. Maybe this is why we chose by 50% to 50% to keep pews over chairs. So we wanted to be family together in the pews. I think we probably arrived at our open and affirming statement from a place of family, of caring for those who are near to us. I know that there were longtime members of the congregation who had estranged gay children, and they were strong proponents of becoming open and affirming so we could widen that circle of being family together. The problem is that familiarity will only get you so far. And we are also called to care for and to do justice for people who are radically unlike us, whose lives we can make no sense of, both just down the street and around the world as well. And I think that's one of the things that we're called to do, is to try and chew on this for a while and figure out how we make those connections. And part of it is just doing it. Part of it is literally picking something and doing it, and trusting and hoping and encouraging that other people are picking other things. The reality is that though nothing is impossible with God, we do only have limited resources of time and energy. And we have to decide how to spend those. And so I think about this honestly when I confront someone who is homeless on the street and who is asking for money for me. I get to decide whether to share that money or not. And usually my thing is sort of, because I almost never carry cash anyway, whatever's in my pocket, it's yours. And how you choose to spend that is up to you, because I'm honoring you as a person and your choices. But I know that I've given money to people who didn't deserve it. And I know that I've not given money to people who do. And it's the same thing. We choose to work outside, we choose to work inside. If we are constantly in conversation about that balance and how we do that, that's what I'm aiming for. The worst thing for me would be for us to figure out, okay, we're going to give 60% inside and 40% outside, and that's written in the budget and in the bylaws, and we never change that. Because sometimes a need will occur inside or outside, and we need to be able to respond to that in love, and with a lot of humility, and asking God to forgive us for the times when we've done those things we shouldn't have done and left undone those things that we should have in that place. But as long as we're asking the question constantly, every year, every month, what is God calling us to do? Where's that place for us? Where's that balance?
I would say that we're not like, we aren't set up to operate like public education or a college degree, where this is the things that we have to do, right? To prove that we have learned everything that we need to learn as a Christian, right? Or to do everything that we're supposed to do as an organization. I think we are really bound to those who are showing up. Right? Those who are showing up, each one of you have needs, right? You have needs of this congregation. That's why you're here. Some of you have needs because you need a safe place that you can just be who you are. You've had experiences in other churches or in your own families where you just can't be accepted for who you are, and you need that. And that's all you need. Others of you come because you have this need to engage in the world, and you want to use faith as a starting point, or that foundation of how do I engage in the world. And so you might be interested more in how do I get things out there. And so one of the challenges that we have, both as pastors and as our council, which is made up of church members, one of the challenges we have is trying to figure out where we are today. Who do we have coming that has needs, both internal and external? And that changes constantly, because it's not the same set of people that are showing up every week or for even a period of time. Our congregation this year looks very different than what it looked like July of last year. So that's that needing to be in constant conversation. I will also add, though, that I am a strong believer that church communities are a place where we should feel safe to stretch ourselves. So for those of us who just want to come here and just be fed, maybe we find something that does stretch us outside of our comfort zone and do something a little bit, because this should be a family, again, a safe place that we can try new things and do new things, maybe develop new skills. Maybe you fall in love with going on the youth mission trip. Ian's been 10 times in a row now. Just different things that you never would have done before. So I think that's an important aspect of it too. But in order for that to be successful, again, going back to last week's sermon, right? We need to be in relationship with one another. We need to be building that community. We need to be expressing what our needs are, not only just to me and John, but to others around, and give that space and that opportunity for others to be able to meet those needs.
I think also we romanticize the idea of family as a church. Oh, we're one big church family. Oh, right? Have you romanticized your own family experience? My family is not terribly romantic, right? Facebook can be romantic because I pick every person that is in my group. I self-select to that group. My family, no one but God selected for me. And I will be in relationship to them, some kind of relationship, my entire life. And so I think there's actually depths to that image of family as metaphor that we haven't really explored. We've kind of gone the Hallmark route with family, and not the after-school special route with family, and those might be two very different things. So learning to live, because frankly, it is difficult to live with other people, and that's as part of the stretching. That you're sitting next to somebody whose experience is radically different already in that place. We probably ought to end it there, I think. We've done that. So we will make sure, we're going to keep these separate because we know we've responded to these, but we will put these up on the Facebook page and on the website. You can look for them there. Thank you so much. Would you like to pray us out of this?
Sure. Gracious, loving God, thank you for this opportunity to come and wonder together.